Welcome to another edition of the Big News Roundup. I'm Bill Thomas, and here's what's happening right now. Governor Tim Walz demanding that the Trump administration pay Minnesota more than $200 million in cash in order to reimburse his state for expenses related to the recent ICE raids in the area. An independent government watchdog group calling for an immediate investigation into the business dealings of Congresswoman Ilhan Omar, claiming that her recent financial disclosure forms, they are extremely misleading. And Bernie Sanders goes toe-to-toe with Gavin Newsom over California's controversial plan to place a massive wealth tax on Golden State billionaires. Also, Pope Leo, the Chicago guy, finally weighs in concerning his invitation to join President Trump's prestigious Board of Peace. And you won't believe your ears when you find out who's giving passionate advice to heartbroken actress Nicole Kidman following her recent split with her musician hubby, the guitar-playing guy, country music star Keith Urban. All this and a bunch more is coming up right now on the Big Roundup. We have a great deal to get to today, and we begin right here. Claiming that fraud-plagued Minnesota has racked up extraordinary expenses due to the recent ICE surge in their state, Governor Tim Walz now demanding that the Trump administration pick up the entire tab. And in a goofy, absurd twist, he's asking them to fork over hundreds of millions of dollars in reimbursement. Sure, no problem. Along with his buddy and fellow Democrat Minneapolis Mayor Jacob Frey, the governor bizarrely claims that ICE raids eventually wound up costing his state more than $200 million in lost revenue and overhead, though he conveniently fails to break down those expenditures. You got to itemize, son. He continues his tantrum by saying that because the federal government is directly responsible for creating the problem in the first place, they're now obligated to pay up and fix what they broke. And in his view, that means they must now compensate the good people of his fine state for shouldering the economic and emotional burden of ICE's recent operation. Somebody needs a hardcore reality check. Furthermore, Walz claims that sooner or later there's going to be legitimate accountability for what recently happened in Minnesota. However, he says that the federal government needs to start owning up to their recent mistakes by first taking full responsibility for their actions. Okay, Timmy boy, but you first. Tell us where that $9 billion went. He also goes on to argue that no matter how you slice it or dice it, the feds don't simply get a free pass to break things in Minnesota and then bail out of the area without doing anything at all to repair all the damage they caused. As a result, the governor says he's now calling on state lawmakers to do everything in their power to make sure the Trump administration pays them back for all their lost funds. However, even wacky Mayor Frey seems to be a bit more realistic when he says that he's not naive enough to think they'll get the entire amount. Well, we'll give you maybe 20 or 30 clams, and that's pretty much it. And take it or leave it. Meanwhile, despite facing a federal investigation concerning billions of dollars worth of fraud, he's already announced plans to shell out at least $10 million worth of something he calls forgivable emergency loans designed to help small businesses who can prove they were financially harmed by ICE's recent Operation Metro surge. Fact check. Forgivable loans, that's code for more free money. It's how they do it in Minnesota. For his part, border czar Tom Homan, mocking the governor's latest rant, says that while he agrees to a lot of things are broken in Minnesota, they simply aren't because of the Trump administration. He also wants to know why Walz didn't ask for reparations from the former Biden administration for their utter failure to safeguard our nation's broken southern border. Speak up, Governor Timbo. Cat got your tongue? There's the hotline right there. Ring through anytime. We'll put you on the air. In the meantime, Walz now admits he'd rather eat glass than potentially take over a vacant seat in the U.S. Senate, thus sparing us all from his long-winded diatribes if he were ever to mount one of his lengthy filibusters over yonder on Capitol Hill. Final thought, and this is the News Roundup Lowdown, and here's the way I see it. The soon-to-be ex-governor of Minnesota wants the federal government to use our tax dollars, yours and mine, to pay for damages in his state, which he claims were caused by the Trump administration. Well, clearly, the damage done, especially in Minneapolis, was caused by him, Ilhan Omar, Mayor Frey, and a bunch of their cohorts. They're the ones who encouraged people to battle federal law enforcement agents while they were simply attempting to do their jobs. He's running the state. He's in charge, at least for now. He's fully responsible for absolutely everything, and he's not getting one red cent from the Fed, at least not on my watch, anyway. This is really no different than the soft rock band Guns N' Roses taking the presidential suite at the Ritz-Carlton Hotel in Manhattan. After they check in, they invite the Rolling Stones and a few hundred complete strangers to stop on over for a nightcap. Now, they party all night long, wrecking life for other hotel guests, trashing the room, lighting fires, breaking the windows, and just kind of demolishing the place. Sadly, dare I say tragically, at the end of the night, they find out that one of their precious little guitars or accordions gets a bit banged up, so they demand $1 billion in damages from the overpriced Motel 6. Exactly. Doesn't work that way. It's not going to happen. Governor Walz, you broke it. You fix it. You're in absolutely no position to tell the federal government to pay for your mess. You're the single most, in my mind, most ineffective, incompetent, and by some accounts, the most corrupt governor in the history of our country. Yeah, you even beat out that former Illinois governor, Rod Blagojevich. Remember him? He's the one they used to affectionately call the Senate seat-selling governor. We all remember him very fondly. And one more thing, a love letter to Tim Walz from the whole country. Dear Unky Tim, the $9 billion in fraud in your state. Should the Fed pick up the tab for that as well? Love, America. And turning now to another troubled Democrat from Minnesota who just can't seem to keep herself out of the spotlight, especially when it comes to lingering questions regarding how she managed to sock away tens of millions of U.S. greenbacks on a meager lawmaker's salary. Yeah, tell us all about that. Try as she might to deflect attention away from her inexplicable wealth, the one and only U.S. Congresswoman from Somalia, Ilhan Omar, now coming under increased fire from a government watchdog group. They're desperately urging Congress to act against her before it's too late. Chop, chop. So, the group is a conservative nonprofit from Virginia called the National Legal and Policy Center, and they're now insisting that Omar be immediately investigated by the Office of Congressional Conduct for making a number of misleading statements regarding her husband's net worth. According to their complaint, the watchdog believes that the information contained in Omar's most recent financial disclosure forms, as well as her public comments about those finances, they're completely implausible. Yeah, I've been saying that for a long time. And they're also calling for a thorough probe to begin immediately, if not sooner. As evidence, they point directly to the declared value of her husband, Tim Mynette's highly suspect business holdings, which, over the course of just 1 year, mysteriously rose from the ashes to having a net worth of, check this out, nearly $30 million without any legitimate source of income at all. How's that happen? Furthermore, the group also accuses Omar of directly violating her congressional code of conduct by intentionally encouraging her Somalia-born constituents to completely refuse to cooperate with both ICE agents and federal authorities who are simply trying to investigate Minnesota's staggering welfare fraud. Essentially, she's the troublemaker in charge. And that's why I always call her my little Miss Bucket of Sunshine. Gotta love her. In the meantime, the Watchdog Group's lawyer says that he's already officially filed their complaint with the Justice Department, and that if all goes according to plan, and why shouldn't it, Omar could eventually face criminal charges for her role in advising illegal immigrants to lie to federal law enforcement. Now, for her part, the Somalia-born lawmaker claims that the inflated numbers she listed on her recent congressional form simply reflect the total value of the businesses in which her husband is a partner. I don't get it either. And not his individual share of those companies at all. Sounds like a bit of a shell game. Final thought, and this is the News Roundup Lowdown, and this is getting on my very last nerve. Now, look, a college buddy of mine, a late-night assistant manager at a convenience store, and with overtime a couple of years ago, he made $51,000. He and I talked just last weekend. He now also has a net worth of $30 million. Yeah, kind of like Madam Omar, so you see it kind of happens. My Uncle Bradley works at a tire store. As recently as last April, he had a net worth of $51,000 as well, and he is now also magically worth $30 million. I don't see anyone calling for my college buddy or my Uncle Brad to get investigated. On the other hand, they're not overpaid government employees, so I suppose this time around they sort of get a free pass. There's also this, from time to time, with the whole country breathing down the neck of Ilhan Omar and her newfound wealth, I feel compelled to kind of come to her defense. Maybe girlfriend got lucky at the blackjack table, hit a home run, pocketed all that dough, $30 million. Although if she tipped the dealer 10 clams, I guess that would theoretically drop her total earnings down just a drop. And what about this? There's also the potential for the I know nothing defense. Now, Minnesota Governor Tim Walz, he used that line regarding the billions in fraud being investigated in his state. And perhaps she could do the same thing. I know nothing about that $30 million in my bank and no idea how it got there. Last I checked, ignorance is a highly effective defense in any respectable investigation and or courtroom. So you go ahead with your goofy little investigations, and I can approximately 3% guarantee that there's absolutely nothing to see here. Switch gears now and set our sights on California, my home base, where a controversial proposal to levy an enormous tax on billionaires is threatening to create a civil war within the Democratic Party. Fight, 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 absolutely, bring it on. Now, in case you're not aware, one of the state's largest healthcare unions aiming to put a measure before voters which would impose a one-time 5% additional tax on the total assets of each of the Golden State's wealthiest citizens, and then use that cash windfall to provide healthcare services to low-income people. Yeah, I saw that movie as well, Robin Hood. That's brilliant. It's just a twist on a real old plot. You rob from the rich and you give to the poor, and you're everybody's hero. In the meantime, that proposal now creating a massive split among leading Democrats, as you can imagine, with Governor Gavin Newsom claiming that it's going to drastically harm his state's economy, and socialist Bernie Sanders hoping to use it as a blueprint for additional states throughout our entire nation. Drag the whole country down. Fine idea. Now, for his part, Grandpa Bernie, he points to our nation's growing wealth inequality as his primary reason for supporting the tax, warning that our country will definitely not thrive in the future if so few people are allowed to own so much. And again, code for rich folk are simply evil. In the meantime, Newsom and his cronies argue that passing the measure is only going to make things worse for the people of California. Absolutely correct. The governor claims it's ultimately going to scare away businesses, also result in significantly lower tax revenue, and do absolutely nothing at all to improve his state's current affordability issues concerning health care, school cuts, and so much more. It's a mess out here. Many political observers, they say this kind of split among Democrats far from ideal leading up to this year's critical midterms. However, despite arguing that it's far better overall for the party to be united, they also say the measure provides a key opportunity for successful Democratic candidates to ultimately separate themselves from the rest of the pack. And by the way, it's far from certain that the proposal will ever reach the ballot box, in part because supporters need to come up with hundreds of thousands of signatures simply in order to qualify for the upcoming election. In the meantime, over there in New York City, another progressive politician also calling for higher taxes on the rich. In order to pay for his bloated budget, Socialist Mayor Zoran Mamdani, the one we call Mamkami, is now urging state politicians to place a big giant tax increase on the wealthy while simultaneously threatening to raise property taxes by a staggering 10% until he ultimately gets his way. Final thoughts, and this is the News Roundup Lowdown, and here's the way I see it. Now, look, I'm no fan of that California state governor, groovy Gavin Newsom. Bernie Sanders is goofier than a mushroom-flavored milkshake, and between the two of them, they'll do all they can to collapse the state on their way to collapsing the country. Granddad Bernie wants what he calls a heavy tax on billionaires, and it's a lie. It's a lie and a scam. What he really wants to do is vilify people who, in his mind, have too much money, and he doesn't want to tax them. He simply wants to steal their dough. Penalize people who have worked hard, sacrificed much, created wealth, generated jobs, and made significant contributions to our great country. You know, the Bernie-licious one also claims to be unhappy about the growing wealth and income inequality in our country. And hey, Grandpa, it's called capitalism. It works real well. It has for a long time, and it's the American way. Now, in his defense, I'll say this. Bernie cakes would make a great island nation dictator, and I think it'd fit in very well in Cuba. You know, over there, his work is pretty much already done. You think about it, there are no billionaires in Cuba. And in the other corner, yeah, the gruesome one, Gavin the unscrupulous Newsom. He sort of kind of gets it. Tax the billionaires who are keeping the former Golden State afloat, and they'll simply jump ship and help to further sink California's economy. Yeah, I call it the former Golden State because it's actually kind of turning into the aluminum state. And so, you know, it just gets worse by the minute right here in our home base, Southern California, all of California. Moving along now to breaking developments from the Lone Star State, where authorities are now suing a China-affiliated tech company for allegedly giving the Chinese Communist Party free and open access to thousands of devices owned by American consumers. According to Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton, despite claims of being both private and secure, products from a company called TP-Link Systems are being repeatedly used by China's state-sponsored hacking groups, all to launch harmful cyber attacks, and right here in the U.S. Goes on to say the company is deliberately lying to people about the integrity of their networking devices, and furthermore that their products are a clear and present national security threat, which allows China to spy on people throughout Texas. Well, for their part, California-based TP-Link claims they're now a spinoff from their former parent firm in China, that all their data is stored on Amazon Web Services as well, and that the Chinese government currently has no control over any of that information at all. But as I always say, proceed with caution. Now, a couple of additional headlines we're also keeping a very close watch on here in the News Roundup newsroom. And first up, the U.S. Air Force announcing plans to please President Trump by repainting several Boeing 747 jet airliners, including Air Force One, with 47's preferred colors of red, white, gold, and dark blue. Nobody listens to me. Several weeks ago, I recommended magenta, but again, I guess my vote doesn't count. Moving along, the Vatican says that Pope Leo, that Chicago guy, turning down an offer to join President Trump's prestigious Board of Peace, adding that, in their view, international issues are better off when they're handled by the UN. And in Washington, a watchdog group within the Labor Department says they've just located nearly $1 billion worth of COVID-era unemployment benefits on prepaid debit cards, which they claim are currently in extreme danger of falling into the hands of fraudsters. Great, more fraud, just what the doctor ordered. And now, quick gander at a bit of showbiz news. We'll kick things off today with a legendary superstar who is reportedly helping an old gal pal make it through her devastating breakup by providing her with a warm shoulder to cry on. Yeah, according to the always reliable National Enquirer, and I think Dan Rather years ago used to work there. I'll have to check on that. Following her recent split from hubby Keith Urban, that country music legend, great guitar player, heartbroken Oscar winner Nicole Kidman now picking up the pieces of their shattered life by receiving comfort and advice from her dear friend, 71-year-old widower John Travolta. Hey, you know it's going to be a golden day when John Travolta is back in the news. I always liked that guy. So you know he's not pushing a movie or talking about all those big airplanes that he owns down in Florida. As best I can tell, this has nothing to do with shoving rubber tubing deep into your nostrils either. Editor Pranov, a little help with that one.
Hey, Carla, up your nose with rubber hose.
That's what I was trying to say. He's just being a good friend to a movie star divorcee. And because he's the Bachelor, I'm feeling one of those big-time Hollywood romances beginning to brew. And I say let's have a showbiz wedding right here in the News Roundup newsroom. And since I'm the News Roundupper in charge, I think I'll be officiating. And turning now to Sin City itself, Las Vegas, where a star-struck tourist is now suing popular singer Donny Osmond for medical damages after the puppy-love singer allegedly hit her in the eye when he tossed an illuminated ball into the crowd, and that's part of his ongoing residency. I had no idea that Donny Osmond was a doctor. I learn more stuff on this program every day. It's amazing. In any event, the Illinois woman claims she was enjoying the big show when the flying orb flew out of nowhere, smacking her on the back of the head and leaving her with a number of serious injuries, including a detached retina. Yeah, I'd kind of poke my eyes out, too, if I had to sit through a Donny Osmond concert. Those goofy 70s outfits, the platform shoes, those tragic purple socks, and all those goofy ballads. You know, it's a weird world when you go a few rounds with Mike Tyson and survive and tell about it, but a whack in the back of the head by a prop at a Donny Osmond concert, that tweaks your vision and wrenches your neck. No wonder his sister Marie isn't on tour with them anymore. His shows are apparently too violent. And with that, time to call it a wrap on the big News Roundup. So have an awesome day today. Please stay safe. If you haven't done so already, it's real basic. Hit that subscribe button right there. Tell your friends to subscribe as well. With that, we're going to dim the lights and fade to black, and we'll see you right back here next time for another episode of the Big News Roundup.